Entire communities in the Philippine province of Albay are feeling the ill effects of ashfall from a recent eruption of the Mayon Volcano.
At 5:38 in the afternoon on May 2nd, a wall of superheated rock peeled off the southwestern flank of Mayon Volcano and ran 4 kilometers down a slope nobody was watching. Inside the cloud, the temperature was 700 degrees Celsius. The lava that had been bleeding out of the summit for 117 straight days finally did the one thing PHIVOLCS had quietly been afraid of since January, triggering pyroclastic flows from a gully their models did not predict, and the agency is now openly using the word escalation. The mountain has chosen a new direction to come down, and the people sleeping inside the danger zone tonight have no idea that the bell tower of a buried church in Albay, swallowed by this same volcano in 1814, has suddenly become relevant again.
The Mayon Volcano in northeast Albay province has been showing signs of volcanic activity since last week.
The collapse on camera. The footage is striking. A gray-white cloud bulges from the southwestern flank of the most perfectly symmetrical volcano on Earth. And at first glance, it looks like the mountain is simply breathing out. It is not. It is a pyroclastic density current, a ground-hugging avalanche of superheated gas, pulverized rock, and incandescent debris moving fast enough to outrun a car on flat ground, and faster than that on a slope. Inside that cloud, the temperature is roughly 700 degrees Celsius, over 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to vaporize human skin on contact, hot enough to weld a person into the position they were standing in, hot enough to ignite vegetation half a kilometer ahead of the leading edge from radiant heat alone, before the cloud has even arrived. This is the same physical mechanism that killed everyone at Pompeii in 79 AD when Vesuvius collapsed on top of them. It is the same mechanism that killed 77 farmers at Mayon itself in February 1993, when they were tending crops inside the danger zone and the Bonga Gully sent a flow 6 kilometers down across their fields. By the time those farmers saw the cloud, it was already on top of them. Pyroclastic flows do not give you time to run. They do not give you time to drive. The fastest recorded flows at Mayon have moved in excess of 60 kilometers per hour, and a human in a rice paddy has perhaps 15 seconds of warning, most of it sound, not sight. The May 2nd flow did not kill anyone. It came down a gully where no farms had been planted this season, and it stopped roughly 1.5 kilometers short of the populated area's downslope. The footage went out on the evening news. The dust settled. The world looked at it for a few hours and moved on. But inside PHIVOLCS, the people who watch the seismograms for a living were not moving on. They were going back through 116 days of data, looking for the warning that should have told them the South was about to fail. And what they were finding, or rather, what they were not finding, is the part that is making them uneasy. What Bornas called it. The head of the Volcano Monitoring and Eruption Prediction Division at PHIVOLCS, Antonia Bornas, gave a Sunday interview that has been quietly circulating among volcanologists outside the Philippines.
Philippines, I'm Pinky Webb, our source today, PHIVOLCS Volcano Monitoring and Eruption Prediction Division Chief Maria Antonia Bornas. Ma'am Marito, good morning to you and thank you po sa oras.
Her exact words. The newest lava flow in the Miyazi Gully being fed by lava effusion at the crater, instead of growing, advancing, or lengthening, started collapsing. So, the new lava being fed to the young lava flow led to collapse or disgorgement of lava at the collapsed flow front and generation of successive pyroclastic density currents. Disgorgement. That is the word she used. It is not a word volcanologists throw around lightly. It describes a specific failure mode in which the front of a lava flow, instead of advancing forward like a slow tongue, becomes structurally unstable and tears itself off the slope. When that happens on a steep volcano like Mayon, the broken material does not just sit there. It accelerates downhill, fragments in midair, mixes with the gas trapped inside it, and turns into a pyroclastic flow before it has finished falling. That is what the camera caught. The lava did not flow further. It fell apart on the slope, and the falling itself was the eruption. That distinction matters more than it sounds. A lava flow you can map. A lava flow you can warn people about, weeks in advance, because the front advances at a speed you can measure with a wristwatch. A disgorgement gives you nothing. There is no slow advance. There is no gradual building toward an event. The flow is sitting there, looking the way it looked yesterday, and then a single front lobe loses structural integrity and comes off the mountain in a second. By the time the seismic network registers the signal, the cloud is already moving. By the time the alert goes out, it has covered a kilometer. That is why Bornas chose the word she chose. She was not describing a lava flow that had advanced too far. She was describing a lava flow that had stopped advancing and started failing, which is a category of behavior PHIVOLCS does not have a confident model for on a volcano this steep. The pattern break. For the last 116 days, the most active and most watched gullies on Mayon had been Bonga and Basud, on the eastern and southeastern faces. The lava in the Basud Gully had stretched to 3.8 kilometers from the crater. The Bonga flow had reached 3.2 kilometers. Both of them had been advancing in slow, predictable increments, hour by hour, day by day, week by week. PHIVOLCS had cameras trained on them, seismic stations within hearing distance, drones overhead. Every working model the agency had said the next major event would come down one of those two gullies. The Mi-Isi flow, on the southern face, was the shortest of the three at 1.6 kilometers. It was the quiet one. It was the lava lobe that nobody was modeling as the threat, because it had been sitting there, advancing slowly, behaving itself, for 16 straight weeks. In a 24-hour window covering Saturday into Sunday, the PHIVOLCS recorded 284 rockfall events from the summit, roughly one every 5 minutes for a full day and night. In that same window, 14 separate pyroclastic density current signals were registered on the seismic network. 14, not one, not two. 14 distinct flows in a single day, most of them small, most of them high on the slope. And the largest of them, the one the camera caught at 5:38 in the afternoon, came down the gully nobody was watching. This is the part that should bother you, even if you have never set foot in the Philippines. PHIVOLCS is not a small agency. They are not under-resourced. They have one of the densest volcanic monitoring networks in Southeast Asia, deployed on the most watched volcano in their portfolio, and they have been awake at the wheel for 117 consecutive days. They had cameras pointed at the gullies they expected to fail. They had every working model trained on the gullies they expected to fail, and the mountain still came down a different gully. That is not a failure of monitoring. That is a volcano doing something the science does not yet have a confident framework for.
Portals into the heart of the earth, they burn. Bottomless cauldrons fueled by an ancient wrath, bubbling and boiling thousands of miles beneath the surface, and just waiting to burst through.
The mountain has been threatening from the east for 116 days. On day 117, it broke from the south. If staying ahead of what this volcano does next matters, and it should, because the chamber underneath it is doing something the surface eruption is not keeping up with, hit subscribe before the next part. We track this mountain week by week, and the situation is moving faster than the news cycle is keeping up with. Now, what is happening underneath the surface? The chamber is still filling. Mayon sits directly above the Philippine Trench, one of the deepest subduction zones on Earth. The Pacific Plate is grinding underneath the Philippine Plate at roughly 8 centimeters per year, melting at depth, and feeding a magma chamber that has been there for hundreds of thousands of years. The chamber does not empty. It fills, drains, and refills. Through 2025, satellite ground deformation data showed something the analysts were not expecting. The summit of Mayon was inflating, slowly but measurably. As of the most recent measurements, the volcanic edifice is still showing slight northeast swelling on the upslope side. The mountain has been pouring lava out of its top for 117 days, and the chamber underneath it is still gaining volume. The eruption you can see, the rivers of red rock on the eastern face, the ash plume, the pyroclastic flows, is not the main event. It is the safety valve.
This sped-up camera footage shows a pyroclastic density current. This is a destructive avalanche of hot gas, ash, and rock fragments that race down volcanic slopes.
And the May 2nd disgorgement suggests the safety valve may not be wide enough to handle what is rising into the chamber from below. The lava is part of the problem. What is pouring out of Mayon is not the runny Hawaiian kind. It is hypersthene andesite, thick, sticky, saturated with dissolved gas. It does not pour, It piles. It builds layer on layer on a summit slope that already exceeds 30 degrees in places, until the outside cools into a crust. The crust traps more gas, and the whole structure becomes top-heavy. Sooner or later, gravity wins. The pile gives way. What comes off the mountain at that point is not lava anymore. It is a moving cloud of rock and gas at 700 degrees Celsius. That is what disgorgement means in plain language. Every additional day of effusion adds weight to a stack. The slope is already past the point of holding, and the chamber underneath is still pushing more material up. There is one more number that matters here, and it is the number PHIVOLCS will not put in a press release. When the eruption began on January 6th, the agency was logging 2 or 3 rockfalls per day off the summit. By February, it was dozens. By March, it was over 100. By April, it was sitting in the low 200s. The 284 number from this past weekend is not a one-day spike. It is the new baseline. Mayon is shedding more material per day now than at any point since the eruption started, and the slope angle of the upper cone has been measurably steepening as the lava piles up. Every day adds material to the top and removes structural support from the sides. That is not an equilibrium. That is a setup for a larger collapse. Kagsawa, 1814. There is a town in Albay called Kagsawa. It does not exist anymore. On February 1st, 1814, Mayon produced a magnitude 4 eruption on the volcanic explosivity index. An ash column climbed 50 kilometers into the sky. Then the column collapsed. A pyroclastic flow rolled down the southern flank of the mountain and hit Kagsawa at full speed. The villagers, hundreds of them, ran into the stone Catholic church believing the walls would protect them from the heat. They were entombed inside. The entire town was buried under 9 meters of ash. The roof of the church collapsed under the weight of the volcanic debris. The bell tower, the highest point in the village, was the only structure tall enough to keep its top above the ash line. That bell tower is still there today. 212 years later, it is still standing in the dirt at Kagsawa Ruins Park, sticking out of the ground like a broken finger. Tourists drive out from Legazpi to take photographs in front of it, with Mayon smoking in the background, and they call it the Pompeii of the Philippines. The death toll from the 1814 eruption is estimated at 1,200. Most of the bodies were never recovered. They are still down there, beneath the soil, beneath the volcanic ash, beneath the picnic tables of a tourist park. The same volcano that did that, in the same direction it did it, is the volcano that just produced a pyroclastic flow on its southern flank on May 2nd, 2026. The Mi-Isi Gully, where the new flow originated, drains toward the same general sector of the mountain that buried Kagsawa. That is not a prediction, that is geography. The drainage pattern of a stratovolcano does not change in 2 centuries. The gullies that channeled the flow in 1814 are the same gullies channeling lava and rockfall today. What has changed is that there are now far more people living in the path of those gullies, and most of them have grown up being told the mountain is a tourist attraction. Kagsawa is the photograph at the end of that sentence. The bell tower in the picture, with Mayon smoking in the background, is the only piece of the village left above the soil because the church it was attached to was the highest building, and even it almost did not survive. The villagers inside the church believed the stone walls would hold against the heat. The walls held. The roof did not. They suffocated under volcanic ash before the flow itself reached them. Their bodies were never recovered because the ash welded into rock as it cooled, and the village underneath it was never excavated. The farmers inside the zone, the 6-kilometer permanent danger zone around Mayon, is not empty. It contains rice paddies, coconut plantations, carabao, the working water buffalo. A family's livelihood depends on pigs, chickens, small concrete houses owned by people who have been told for decades that the mountain is dangerous and have lived their entire lives without seeing it actually do what it is doing now. So, when the alert went to level 3 in January and the governor of Albay ordered the evacuation of roughly 3,000 residents from the zone, most of them went to the evacuation centers, and then they started slipping back during the day, just to feed the animals, just to check on the house, just to harvest a little before the ash made it impossible. Ashfall has now been reported across 52 barangays spread over 4 municipalities. Schools have closed. Crops are being abandoned because the ash has made the leaves inedible to livestock. Thousands of people are sleeping in evacuation centers, gymnasiums, converted classrooms, tents on basketball courts. PHIVOLCS knows the zone is being violated daily. The provincial government knows. The barangay captains know. And the people inside the zone looked up at the smoking summit and made the calculation that humans have made in front of every volcano in history. The mountain has been smoking for months and nothing has happened to me yet. The cow has to eat. So they stayed. On May 2nd at 5:38 in the afternoon, the mountain demonstrated to a high-resolution camera and through the camera to the world that the calculation was wrong. The flow did not reach the populated areas. It stopped well short of the danger zone boundary, but it came down a gully nobody was watching, in a direction nobody was modeling, and it traveled 4 kilometers in seconds. 4 kilometers is 2/3 of the way to the line where people live. The next disgorgement, if it comes, may not stop where this one did. What PHIVOLCS will not say out loud. PHIVOLCS has not lowered the alert level. They have not announced an end to the eruption. They have not even announced a slowdown. The lava is still advancing in all 3 of the main gullies. The rockfalls are still being recorded. The seismic network is still picking up tremor signals consistent with magma movement at depth. The summit is still inflating, even as it bleeds. The question now is not whether Mayon will erupt again. It is already erupting. It has been erupting without stopping for 117 days. The question is not whether the next pyroclastic flow will come down. There have been multiple of them this year. The ME-IC sequence on Saturday alone produced 14 PDC signals in a single 24-hour window. The question is whether the disgorgement event on the southern flank was a one-off failure of a specific lava lobe, or whether it was the first sign that the chamber underneath the mountain has more pressure than the current eruption can release safely. PHIVOLCS will not commit to an answer. They are scientists. They will tell you what the instruments show. The instruments show inflation. The instruments show 14 PDC signals in 24 hours. The instruments show a new gully producing flows that older models did not predict. The instruments show a volcano that is not winding down and may be winding up. They will not say more than that, because saying more, in the absence of data they do not yet have, is the kind of statement that gets a scientist removed from a position. So, they speak carefully. They use the word escalation. They keep the alert at level 3. They watch. What they cannot say in a press conference, but what is implicit in every measurement they have published since the May 2nd flow, is that the model they were using to predict where this eruption would go next is the model the volcano just disproved. The ME-IC disgorgement was not in any forecast scenario PHIVOLCS had distributed to the local government. The agency is now rebuilding its working assumptions in real time while the eruption continues, while the chamber continues to inflate, and while 3,000 people who were supposed to be evacuated are sleeping in school gyms with their livestock tied up outside the fence. The next forecast, when it comes, will be more cautious than the last one. That cautiousness will read in the press as escalation. It will not be a change in the mountain. It will be a change in what the agency is willing to commit to on paper. And underneath them, the chamber keeps filling. The bell tower of Kagsawa Church still stands in the dirt 2 centuries later, half buried, as a warning that nobody planned to leave behind. The only thing that has changed since 1814 is the number of people who would die if it happened again, and the resolution of the cameras that would record it. We are tracking 3 other volcanoes on the same Pacific arc that are showing the same chamber inflation signature Mayon showed in 2024. If you want the next update before the news cycle picks it up, subscribe and tell me in the comments. If you were one of the farmers inside the 6-kilometer zone, with your livestock and your house, and 117 days of nothing happening behind you, would you have stayed or would you have gone? I want to know what you would have done.